It's Friday, everyone. What do we do on Fridays here at the Hint Hive? That's right, we smash the patriarchy. Hello, ladies of the Hive. Welcome back to the Hint Hive, Amplifying Women's Voices. I'm your host, Kelly Hint, psychotherapist, life coach, and your resident queen bee. Today's episode is one that I have wanted to do for a long time because it shows up everywhere in women's lives. Our romantic relationships, our friendships, families, workplaces, and yet it's still wildly misunderstood, minimized, or even dismissed as a personal flaw instead of what it really is. We're talking about women and codependency. And before anyone gets defensive, no, this episode is not about blaming women or diagnosing you with something. This is about naming the system that trained us to disappear for love, safety, approval, and survival. If you've ever felt responsible for other people's emotions or reactions, if you've ever stayed in relationships far longer than you should have because you felt guilty or afraid, if you have confused self-sacrifice, exhaustion, or overfunctioning with love, if you've been praised for being low maintenance while quietly burning out, or if you've ever been called too much the moment you asked for reciprocity or accountability, yeah, pull up a chair, get comfortable, because this one's for you. Let's ground this in real psychology for a moment, not internet buzzwords. We're going to talk about what codependency actually is, not the TikTok version. Codependency originally came out of addiction psychology. It described patterns where one person organizes their entire sense of worth, identity, and emotional safety around managing, rescuing, fixing, or controlling another person's behavior, often at the complete expense of their own needs, limits, and well-being. Over time, clinicians noticed these same patterns showing up outside of addiction dynamics, especially in women, across romantic relationships, families, and caregiving roles. But here's the feminist truth bomb that we need to sit with. Women didn't accidentally become codependent. We were socially conditioned to be. Modern psychology describes codependency as patterns that include excessive people-pleasing and fear of conflict, difficulty setting, holding, or enforcing boundaries. You all know I love a good boundary conversation. Overfunctioning while others underfunction, hypervigilance to others' moods and needs, fear of abandonment or rejection, self-worth tied to being needed, helpful, or indispensable, and chronic guilt, anxiety, or shame when prioritizing yourself. If you're nodding along, thinking, wow, that's my whole personality, let me be clear. This is not a character defect. This is not weakness. This is gender socialization mixed with survival strategies. And if you're finding any of these things familiar, you don't need to label yourself as codependent, but maybe become more aware of how these behaviors are affecting your mental health and well-being, as well as your relationships. And also, I'm just going to put it out there. I've done a lot of this myself, and I've had to learn healthier ways of interacting at times. Let's shift now to why codependency hits women so hard. From the time we're little, girls are rewarded, sometimes overtly, sometimes subtly, for being nice, helpful, pleasant, emotionally attuned to others, self-sacrificing, accommodating, and flexible. Sound familiar? Meanwhile, boys are often rewarded for being independent, assertive, self-focused, emotionally detached or stoic, and encouraged to prioritize autonomy over connection. For any of my guys listening, does that sound familiar? Or my ladies, does that sound familiar for any guys out there that you know? So, when women grow up and lose themselves in relationships, the question is not what's wrong with her. The real question is who benefited from her self-erasure. Codependency thrives in systems where women are expected to manage emotional labor for everyone, where men are allowed or even encouraged to remain emotionally underdeveloped, where mothers are praised for martyrdom and self-denial, where caretaking is feminized and undervalued, and where women's worth is measured by how much they give, not how well they live. This is why so many women feel exhausted, resentful, anxious, invisible, and deeply disconnected from themselves, yet somehow still feel guilty for even naming that pain. Now let's talk codependency versus healthy interdependence. First, let me clear something up right now. Needing people does not make you weak. Do I need to say it again for the people in the back? Needing people does not make you weak. Also, healing codependency does not mean becoming cold, detached, hyper-independent, or emotionally unavailable. Healthy relationships involve interdependence, not codependency. And here's the difference. Codependency sounds like, if I don't do it, everything will fall apart. I can't upset them, even if I am hurting. My needs can wait. Their needs come first. I'll be okay once they are okay. Love means enduring. And if you're a mom, I'm willing to bet that you can identify with several of those. We tell ourselves that being a good mom means self-sacrifice. But on the other side of codependency, interdependence sounds like I can care deeply without rescuing or overfunctioning. Their emotions belong to them. My needs matter just as much as theirs. I can stay connected without abandoning myself. Love includes accountability and reciprocity. See the difference there? One requires self-erasure. The other requires self-respect. And just a little side note, when my children were babies, I thought that being a good mom meant the ultimate self-sacrifice all the time. And I'm not telling you to abandon your children. I'm not telling you not to be a good mom. But being a good mom does not involve overexhaustion. It does not involve constant sacrifice. You have to take care of you too. So again, if this is something that you're really struggling with, you and I may need to have a conversation. Let's talk for a minute about how codependency shows up in women's lives, because I see this constantly in my therapy office and my coaching work, and it shows up in ways that sometimes women don't always recognize as codependency. And again, as I list these, if you are relating to them, please don't think this is finger pointing. Please don't think that you have to be labeled as codependent. It just means that these are some behaviors that you might need to be a little bit more aware of and potentially work on. So, how does codependency show up in women's lives? I see this constantly in my therapy office and my coaching work, and it shows up in ways that women don't always recognize as codependency. It looks like being the fixer, the therapist, or the emotional manager in every relationship. It looks like staying quiet to keep the peace, even when something feels deeply wrong. It can look like over-explaining, justifying, or softening your boundaries. It can look like feeling intense anxiety when someone is upset with you. That gut-wrenching, gnawing feeling in your stomach. It can look like taking responsibility for other people's healing, growth, or choices. This is kind of one that I struggled with myself, with my kids, unfortunately. There were times when I just felt like I had to fix it all. Even though if they made a choice and they had a consequence to sit with, it should have been theirs to sit with, but I went into fix-it mode. I wanted to clean it up because, I was being a good mom. I'm sure some of you can relate to that. In P.S., that was sarcasm for those of you who can't see my face or recognize sarcasm on my face. It can also look like confusing emotional intensity, chaos, or trauma bonding with intimacy. Think about that in some of your platonic relationships. I know of people in my personal life who intensely bond with another person and they feel that they have this hugely intimate relationship when honestly it's just chaos. So it's important not to confuse the chaos and the trauma bonding with actual healthy relationships. And codependency can also show up when you feel valuable only when you're useful. I know a lot of women that struggle with that. If you're not doing something for someone, then you have no value. Nope, false. And also, let me say this clearly and slowly. Loyalty that costs you your identity is not love. If you are in a relationship with someone, platonic or romantic, and you are required to stay silent, to minimize yourself, to erase the person that you are, that is not love. Consistency without reciprocity is not partnership. And suffering is not proof of devotion. Now, let's talk some actionable steps to start healing codependency. Because I've given you what it looks like. Now, what can we do about it? Let's get practical. Healing codependency is not about becoming selfish. It's about becoming whole. So let's go over some steps to begin the healing process. Step number 1, start noticing where you self-abandon. Because awareness is everything. Ask yourself, what do I routinely say yes to that I secretly resent? Where do I silence myself to avoid conflict or rejection? Who benefits when I stay small, quiet, or agreeable? Ladies, self-awareness is the first act of rebellion. And if you're here listening to this podcast or watching this podcast, I hope you're here for the rebellion. Because as women, we've got to push back if we want to make any progress or kind of take back some of the progress that's been stolen lately. Won't go on that rant right now. Step number 2, learn to sit with guilt without obeying it. Guilt is not a moral compass. It is often a conditioning response. When you have been trained to put others first, choosing yourself will feel wrong at first. Ladies, hear me when I say this. You can feel guilty and still say no. Practice telling yourself, I'm allowed to disappoint people to stay aligned with myself. And remember, discomfort does not mean danger. As a matter of fact, if you're uncomfortable, you're doing it right. So keep it up. Step number 3, stop over-explaining your boundaries. You do not need a dissertation, a backstory, or a trauma resume to justify your limits. Right here, guilty of doing that. I have struggled with that one myself. When I have tried to set healthy boundaries, it always came with an explanation. And one of my teachers in grad school all but beat that out of me through a very humiliating example, a role play. So I learned back in grad school that no is a complete sentence. So instead of launching into the reason why you can't do this is because this, and this, nope. Try some simple, grounded statements like, that doesn't work for me. Or, I'm not available for that. Or, I've made my decision. Or just a simple no. I actually had to push back on someone in a professional capacity. And it was very recently. I was being asked to do something that was absolutely not okay with me. It actually had something to do with my father, which if you watched or listened to last week's episode, you know how much I love being a caregiver. Sarcasm. So I was in this position with this person who was wanting me to do a thing that would take even more time that I absolutely could not do. And I am so proud of myself. I actually feel like I should go buy myself a drink or something, because I looked at her and I smiled and I just simply said, I'm unavailable to do that. And I left it at that. And guess what? The world did not cease to exist. My life did not crumble into 1,000 pieces. The person wasn't even mad at me. They just smiled at me and said, okay. So ladies, if I can do it, you can do it. So if someone requires your suffering, your exhaustion, or self-betrayal to feel comfortable, that is not your responsibility. You get to say no. Step number 4. Reclaim your anger. Anger is often the first emotion that women are taught to suppress, shame, or redirect inward. But anger is not the enemy. It's information. It tells you where a boundary has been crossed. It tells you where resentment is building. Instead of asking, how do I make this stop? Try asking, what am I tolerating that I shouldn't be? And finally, step number 5, build an identity outside of being needed. You are more than what you provide for others. Actively invest in your interests and passions, your friendships, your creativity, your pleasure, and your rest. You do not have to earn your right to exist, rest, or take up space. Now, let's bring this home with our affirmation of the week, which is, I will stop breaking myself into pieces to serve others. I will stay whole and let them choke on their own bullshit. Now listen, this affirmation is not about cruelty or punishment. It's about refusing to self-destruct to keep other people comfortable. Codependency teaches women that being whole is selfish, that having needs is dangerous, and that love requires suffering. This affirmation is a declaration that your wholeness is not negotiable. When you stop breaking yourself apart, some people will be uncomfortable. Some may get angry. Some may try to guilt you back into old roles. That does not mean that you are doing something wrong. It means that you are finally doing something honest, healthy, and self-respecting. Healing codependency is one of the most radical acts of self-respect that a woman can make. You are allowed to choose yourself without apology, to let people struggle without rescuing them, to say no without explanation, to be loved without being useful, and to take up space while staying whole. You were never meant to be a sacrificial offering in your own life. If this episode hit home, here's what I want you to do. Share the episode with a woman who is always the strong one. Usually they're the ones that need this message the most. Also, join the Hint Hive podcast Facebook group for deeper, honest conversations. And if you're ready to break lifelong patterns of self-abandonment, check out my coaching and therapy offerings, because you do not have to unlearn this alone. My fellow queens, as always, keep your crown straight and your boundaries strong. Until next time, Hive, keep being awesome. This podcast is powered by Kelly Hint Empowerment Coaching, as well as Kelly M. Hint LMHC and The Cranky Counselor. To find out more about coaching services, head over to CoachKellyHint.com. If you'd like to know more about the psychotherapy services I offer to individuals within the state of New York, you can check out KellyMHint.com. And if you'd like to learn more about aromatherapy, you can check out TheCrankyCounselor.com.